Okay, take about 1 minute to kind of wrap up your conversation. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to have more time this evening to share with one another as well. Does anyone want to just share with the rest of the group one of your things, or someone you were talking to, is one thing that stood out from last night? No? Yes. Oh, Doctor Who and the time traveling stories. Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Yes.
So someone I was talking to took away that they were able to let Jesus into their junk.
Letting Jesus into your junk room. Wonderful. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Thank you. That's beautiful.
I'm lost on this unconditional love.
Unconditional love.
I can't comprehend what it is. I understand that you do everything when you're kids and stand, but what Jesus Christ did, he never sinned and all that going on. That's the only thing of this unconditional.
Yeah. Absolutely. He's talking about everything that Jesus went through and not sinning and just that sense of how even when we try, even when we know it, the idea of unconditional love is just beyond something we can really truly grasp, God's unconditional love for us. Absolutely. Anything else? Yeah. Great. She said I'm talking about the tree of knowledge, right? Not just knowing the difference between good and evil, but actually the ability to decide what is good and what is evil, and then that a gift is only a gift if it can be rejected. Otherwise, it's something else. Yes. Oh, happy anniversary. Tomorrow? Oh, beautiful. He said he'd be nicer to his wife tomorrow. Because how many years have you been married? 53 years. Beautiful. He says his wife is a saint. Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, wonderful. He's talking about the commitment they've made to evangelize, right? To share, to make disciples of their family, their children, but even, just whoever they happen to run into on the street, people in the parish as well. Wonderful. Thank you so much, and happy anniversary. So one of the things that we talked about last night was this core message of the gospel, right? The story of our salvation. The story that overwrites every story that we can find everywhere, written throughout our lives, written throughout all of creation. And if you remember when we talked about it last night, I shared with you that I share this story in 5 movements. That is certainly not the only way to do it. There are many, many ways to do it, from one sentence up to entire books that have been written sharing this story. But when I share it, I have 5 movements. The first, God loves you unconditionally and created you for relationship and communion. We talked about that, broke that open just a little bit last night, what that means. The second, that our relationships and our communion with God and one another are broken by sin. And we talked last night about the difference between living in a world where communion is broken as a result of the fall and the choices that we sometimes make to say to God, I don't need you, I'll take care of it on my own, right? I don't need you to be my original, get out of the way, I've got this. And that sometimes then leads us into sin where we break our relationship with God and we hurt other people. And then sometimes other people When they make those choices, when they sin, when they fall into those temptations, they hurt us. And we end up broken and wounded and hurting because of the result of actions or inactions of others as well. And those different effects that sin can have in our world. And then the third movement was that Jesus Christ restores, heals every single broken communion by his life, death, resurrection, and ascension. Every single broken communion. The ones that are a result of the fall, all of them, as well as the ones that we experience every day in our lives. And then the fourth movement is that he invites us. He invites us to trust in him, to turn away from sin in our lives, to turn away from the things that he is not calling us to turn away from or hand over or let go of the burdens or brokenness or anxieties or woundedness that is keeping us from experiencing God's love, and to surrender that to him. To surrender that to him. This is essential. You will notice that in this core proclamation, now, this is not everything that there is to know about what the church teaches or who we are as disciples or who we are as Christians or who we are as Catholics. It is just the most core message of the gospel. There's so much more that goes into it and that we continue to unpack over the course of our lives. But you will notice that nowhere yet in the first four movements did we talk about going to Mass. Nowhere in those first four movements did we talk about getting your First Communion, going to Bible study. We didn't actually talk about the church at all yet in those first four movements, explicitly, not the church, right? The institutional church. We talk about communion and being created for relationship, and that's very intentional because the church exists to help us learn how to live out that surrender through the whole of our lives. The church exists to help us to continually unpack what's the invitation for me today. What is the Lord asking of me? Where does he want me to surrender right now? The church exists to help provide us extra opportunities to experience that overwhelming love and mercy and grace and gift of God's very life. That's why the church exists. But you see what has to come first. You see what has to come first. First needs to come our surrender to Jesus. That comes first. Our surrender to Jesus. Our surrender individually, my personal surrender, your personal surrender. Our surrender as community, as people on this journey together. Surrender as a family. Surrender in every kind of context that we have, but to be constantly giving that surrender to him first. And I don't know about you, I know I've mentioned already in a couple of these mission nights that I went to Catholic school. And I was a good student. I learned a lot about what the church teaches as a Catholic school student, and then in my undergrad and in my grad program, and then having to teach it to middle schooler and high schoolers. Like, there's nothing that helps you learn something better than having to teach it to another person, right? Especially to middle schoolers and high schoolers who will not let you get away with not really knowing what you're talking about. They'll see through it really fast. So I learned so much about my faith, but this is the thing that I've come to realize, and that the church teachings, that the doctors of the church and the popes and all of this that we have that we believe to be true in the church history has told us over and over again, and sometimes we kind of miss it, that Jesus comes first. That Jesus comes first. In fact, one of the documents of the church is called Catechesis in Modern Times, Catechesi Tradendae, and it is a document that it was saying, how do we teach children about our faith? That's essentially what the document was doing, is saying, as a church, how are we supposed to teach children about the faith? How are we supposed to teach adults? How are we supposed to teach anyone about our faith? And in that document, it says this: the definitive aim of catechesis And catechesis is very simply, right, I mean, some of you probably remember CCD classes, faith formation, parish school of religion, religion class in a Catholic school. There's all different ways that we talk about it, religious education, but the Sunday school, right, all the different ways that we think about it. But when we send kids or adults to any kind of event or program or thing that is intended to help them learn about what do we believe. That's what catechesis is. So the document says that the definitive aim of catechesis is intimacy and communion with Jesus Christ. The goal of anything we do to teach anyone anything about Scripture, about the sacraments, about our faith, about how to pray, any of it, the goal is to help us grow in intimacy and communion with Jesus Christ. But here's the challenge. This is the challenge for every one of us who's ever tried to have a conversation with anyone about what the church teaches or what we believe. The challenge is this. If we teach people about a faith who do not yet know Jesus personally, they are not aware that he is someone actively involved in their lives, who has done all of this for them, who desires to bring them into wholeness and completion and total restoration and healing, and who is inviting them, right, to surrender to him. If they don't know that, but we are still teaching them about what the church teaches, about what we believe, we run the risk that we are asking them to be intimate and in communion with a person they don't know. And we know that's wrong, right? We know that's not the way that we are supposed to be doing it. This is why it's so essential that when we think about how to talk to another person about our faith, how to share our faith with someone else, the first thing we should be sharing, no matter what question they bring to you, no matter what issue they have on their heart, our go-to should be to run and point to Jesus. Every time. It is about him and what he has done. I shared last night that my husband is a bed maker, right? And that I am emphatically not a bed maker. I disagree with it on philosophical levels. But not only is my husband a bed maker, he absolutely has a particular method of bed making. All right, and it is this weird kind of combination of military and hospital and something his mom taught him, and I don't know. I know. I will not bore you with all of the details of the Tony Bird way of making the bed. But I will tell you that I could give an hour-long seminar on my husband and bed making. I could tell you about why he believes that if everyone in the world made their bed, it would be a better place. I probably could give longer than an hour. We've been married 21 years. Like, I have heard all the arguments, right? I could tell you about how you are supposed to make the bed to make sure that it stays as neat as possible and is easier to make it the next time. I could tell you about the role or not of decorative pillows on a bed. I could tell you all of these things. I could even give you a biography of my husband's life and tell you why and try and make a case for why you should listen to him. Because he's a good person, right? He's an educator, and he has this great knowledge and background, and he's fantastic with young people, and he listens well, and I could do all of these things. I could tell you all of this about him. And at the end of that hour-long seminar, if you were not a bed maker before, what are the chances it's going to change your mind? Probably zero, right? Probably zero or close to zero. If you are, I couldn't care either way, you might be like, I'll give it a shot for a little bit, see if there's anything to it. But if you are like me and are emphatically anti-bed making, you're going to sit through that hour-long seminar with your arms crossed, and you're going to leave and go, I don't care what Tony Bird has to say. Right? Yeah, of course. I would have done the same thing in your shoes before I met my husband. And now, I do not make the bed every day. I want to be very clear about that. And my husband has asked me when I share this to make sure people know that I do not make the bed every day. And even when I do not always make it the right way. However, sometimes I make the bed. Why? Because I love my husband. And even though I don't agree with it, and even though it's a pain in my rear end, and even though I think it's the most ridiculous thing, and it's just none of this makes any sense to me, even with all of that, because I love him, I'm willing to do things for him. Because we will do things for people we love, won't we? We will do hard things for people we love. We'll do things that we don't always 100% know if I don't know if that's the right way to do that, or if that's how I would choose it, or right? But we'll do those things because we love someone. Friends, if you have someone in your life who is living a life that you know is not the fullness of what God has called them to, that you are certain that their choices in their life are causing them so much pain and grief and woundedness, and they just can't seem to hear it. And you feel like you're beating your head against a brick wall, and every time it's like, but this is who you're called to be, right? There's something better for you out there. I'm going to tell you that you might as well be giving them a bed making lecture for an hour to somebody who's not interested. If they don't know Jesus, if they don't love him, why? Why change your life? Why live this way? It's hard sometimes. It's challenging. Sometimes I don't understand why God has called me to live a certain way, why he's called me to do certain things. Sometimes I'm not even sure if I agree with him, that this is the best course of action. But when I love someone, I'm willing to do things for them. Even things that are hard or I don't understand or I'm not 100% sure I agree with because I love them. We have to start with Jesus. We have to be starting with Jesus, which means we have to start with our surrender to Jesus. Because I will tell you, the people around you will know when you talk about him if he's someone that you love. Have you ever had a conversation with someone? Maybe you've just met them, right? Or you don't know them super well. And they start to talk about their spouse, or a sibling, or a parent, or maybe an in-law, and they do not say anything derogatory, they do not say anything negative about that person, and yet as they are talking, you are very aware that this relationship is not sunshine and roses. You can tell, right? You can tell when someone's talking about another person, you can tell when, there's maybe a little something going on there. I mean, depending on how well I know this person, I'm either going to ask more and dig, or just I'll leave that one alone. The same is true when we talk to people about our relationship with Jesus. They will be able to tell. This is why it's so important that we start with our surrender first. That's why we spent last night going through this proclamation of the Kerygma. It's why we talk about where am I as a disciple? Because that's what all of this comes from. My love for him. My love for him. That's where we start. So as we dive in tonight, we're going to be talking about more about sharing stories, more about how to fruitfully kind of pull out of people what's their story, where are they coming from. We're going to talk about how to listen well to other people as they start to share with us and as they open up to us. But I want us to make sure we stay grounded in our own relationship with him first. Our own surrender, whatever it is that you've surrendered. I don't know if any of you are familiar, some of you probably are, with the current teenage slang. One of my husband and I's great joys as the parent of teenagers is to intentionally use their slang. And to do it just slip it in. The other night, some of you won't even understand what I'm about to say, but some of you will.